Pick up the notice. Greg Caldwell pointed at the paper lying on my porch. 12 days. Then we start foreclosure. 3 weeks earlier, Greg had driven onto my property, entered my shed, and hauled away my $52,000 tractor because his wife, the HOA president, decided she had the authority to take it. Now he was standing in front of me, threatening to take the house, too. "You stole my tractor, Greg," he smiled. "The HOA authorized it." Then he stepped closer. "What are you going to do about it?" I looked at him for a moment, reached into my back pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. Greg actually smirked. He thought I was reaching for money. I flipped it open. His eyes locked onto the badge. The color drained from his face, and suddenly the man who'd spent 3 weeks treating me like a powerless homeowner couldn't get off my porch fast enough. I bought 4.2 acres on the south end of Ridgerest Estates 2 years before Greg Caldwell ever put his hands on my tractor. It wasn't much to look at. Downright rolling grass, a tree line at the back, a gravel drive that turned to mud after a hard rain, and a detached equipment shed that leaned about 2 degrees to the left. But it was mine. First piece of land I'd ever owned after 10 years of apartment living, saving every paycheck, waiting for something I could walk out the back door and stand on. The tractor came a month after closing. Compact utility, $52,000 paid in cash. That's not a hobby purchase. That's the tool that makes 4 acres livable. Mowing, grading, clearing brush after storms, dragging gravel back onto the drive every spring. Without it, the land owns you. With it, you own the land. I kept to myself out there. Worked long shifts, came home, ran the tractor on weekends, waved to the neighbors when I saw them. Nobody asked what I did for a living, and I never brought it up. Wasn't anyone's business. I liked it that way. The HOA existed, but for the first 18 months, it was background noise. Dues, a newsletter nobody read, a yearly meeting in somebody's garage, standard stuff. Then Denise Caldwell decided she wanted more. Denise had been HOA president for 3 years. Lived in the front section of the subdivision, where the lots were half an acre, the houses were 12 feet apart, and everybody could see everybody else's garbage cans. She ran that section like a hall monitor with a clipboard. But the back lots, the big ones, the ones zoned for agricultural use, we'd always been left alone. That changed 6 months before the theft. Denise launched what she called a community beautification initiative. She presented it at a board meeting I didn't attend. The gist: visible equipment, livestock fencing, storage containers, and anything that looked rural needed to go. She framed it as protecting property values. What it really meant was the backlot owners, the ones with land, the ones who actually used their acreage, were suddenly a problem. I didn't think much of it until the first letter showed up in my mailbox. Violation notice, Lot 14. Unsightly agricultural equipment stored in view of community roadway. Remedy required within 30 days, or daily fines will be assessed. My tractor parked in my own equipment shed. The door happened to be open. I read the notice twice, then pulled out my copy of the CCNRs. Took me about 4 minutes to find the section Denise had cited. Section 4.3, restrictions on heavy or agricultural equipment. Then I read the next line, the one Denise had apparently skipped. Section 4.3 shall not apply to lots exceeding 3 acres in size. My lot was 4.2 acres. It was right there in the subdivision plat, the county records, and the survey I'd received at closing. The rule she'd used to cite me didn't apply to my property, period. I didn't call Denise, didn't knock on her door. I typed a polite 1-page response attached to the lot survey, highlighted the 3-acre exemption, and mailed it certified. I figured that was the end of it. She'd made a mistake, I'd corrected it with documentation, and we'd move on. 2 weeks later, a second notice arrived. Different wording this time. She'd dropped agricultural entirely. Now it was commercial-grade machinery, constituting a visual nuisance and diminishing community aesthetic standards. Same tractor, same shed, same lot, but new language, like she'd gone back to the CCNRs looking for a different angle after the first one failed. The bottom of the notice had a line that wasn't on the first one. Daily fine $200, effective upon expiration of 15-day compliance period. $200 a day for a tractor I owned outright, parked on property that was explicitly exempt from the rules she'd already tried and lost on. I set the letter on my kitchen counter and stared at it for a while. This wasn't a mistake anymore. Denise Caldwell hadn't misread the CCNRs the first time. She'd read my response, seen the exemption, and decided it didn't matter. She'd rewritten the violation, swapped the language, and come back harder. She wasn't enforcing a rule. She was manufacturing one, and she just put a price on it. $200 a day until I did what she wanted. I didn't know it then, but that second letter was the moment everything started moving. Not because of the fine, because it told me exactly what kind of person I was dealing with. Someone who doesn't stop when she's wrong. Someone who rewrites the question when she doesn't like the answer. The tractor sat in the shed. The fines hadn't started yet, and Denise Caldwell was just getting warmed up. I decided to handle it face to face. The next monthly HOA board meeting was on a Tuesday evening held in the community clubhouse. A glorified storage room with folding chairs and a table that smelled like old coffee. I brought a printed copy of the CCNRs with the 3-acre exemption highlighted in yellow. I brought my lot survey. I brought both violation notices. Denise Caldwell sat at the head of the table. 3 other board members flanked her, 2 men and a woman. One of the men, a guy named Roger Whitfield, nodded at me when I walked in. The other 2 didn't look up. I waited until the agenda reached homeowner concerns, then stood and laid my documents on the table. My lot is 4.2 acres, I said. Section 4.3 doesn't apply to lots over 3 acres. I sent a certified response to the first violation with the survey attached. The second violation used different language, but it's citing the same section for the same equipment on the same exempt property. I'm asking the board to rescind both violations in writing. Simple, documented. Done. Denise didn't touch the papers. She folded her hands on the table and tilted her head like I just asked to park a school bus on the front lawn. The board has discretion to interpret community standards for the good of all residents, she said. Not a specific rule, not a section number, just discretion. That's not what the CCNRs say, I told her. The CCNRs give the board broad authority to maintain aesthetic and property value standards across the entire subdivision. Your tractor is a visual disruption. It's in a shed. With the door open, Roger Whitfield cleared his throat. He's got a point, Denise. The exemption's pretty clear. Denise turned her head slowly toward Roger, didn't say a word, just looked at him until he leaned back in his chair and stopped talking. The room got very quiet. The other 2 board members said nothing, not a word. The woman kept her eyes on her phone. The other man found something fascinating about the edge of the table. This was how Denise ran her board, not by arguing, but by making silence the only safe option. The meeting ended without a vote. No resolution passed. The violations weren't formally upheld, but they weren't rescinded either. Denise gathered her papers into her folder, aligned the edges with 2 sharp taps on the table and said, "We'll revisit this at the next session." She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked at Roger. I caught her in the parking lot, not to argue, just to ask. "Denise, you know the exemption applies. Why are we still doing this?" She stopped walking, turned, held her car keys in one hand like a weapon. "Because I decide what applies in this neighborhood, Mr. Morrison, not a piece of paper you printed off the internet. The board will handle this the way the board sees fit." She got in her car and left. I stood there in the parking lot, under a buzzing streetlight, and replayed what she just said. I decide what applies. Not the CCNRs, not the recorded plat, not the state statute. I drove home that night, half convinced it was over anyway. The board had seen the documentation. Roger had spoken up. Denise was outnumbered, even if she wouldn't admit it. Common sense would win. I figured the next letter I'd get would be a quiet retraction. That was a Tuesday. I left for a 36-hour work shift on Thursday morning. Came back Friday evening, pulled up the gravel drive, headlights sweeping across the yard. Something looked wrong before I even parked. The equipment shed door was wide open, not cracked wide, pushed all the way back against the wall. I got out of my truck and walked over. The shed was empty. No tractor, no keys hanging on the hook, just the dark oil stain on the concrete pad where $52,000 worth of machinery had been sitting 12 hours ago. I stood there for a long time, the kind of silence that doesn't feel like silence. It feels like something's been ripped out. I walked around the shed, fresh tire ruts in the soft ground behind it. Deep ones, heavy dual axle, the kind of flatbed equipment trailer leaves. The tracks ran out to the road and turned south. No forced lock. I'd never used a padlock on the shed, never saw a reason. Rural trust. You wave at your neighbors, you leave your doors open, you don't think twice. That was the whole point of buying land out here. The whole point of saving for 10 years and driving past manicured subdivisions until I found a place where people minded their own business. I put my hand on the doorframe of the empty shed and stood there. The oil stain was still wet at the edges. The key hook on the wall had a shadow mark where the ring had hung for 2 years. Whoever took this had walked into my shed, lifted the keys off the hook, started my tractor, and driven it out. In the middle of the day on a street where people were home. I went inside and called the county sheriff's office, reported a theft. $52,000 compact utility tractor, taken from my equipment shed while I was at work. The deputy took the report over the phone, gave me a case number, said someone would follow up. Then I called my neighbor Walt Jennings 2 lots down, asked if he'd seen anything. Walt went quiet for a second. Then actually yesterday afternoon I saw Greg Caldwell's truck and flatbed trailer backed up to your shed. I figured you'd hired him for something. Greg Caldwell, Denise Caldwell's husband. No, Walt, I said. I didn't hire him for anything. I hung up and sat on my porch in the dark. 4 days after I showed the board that Denise's violations were baseless, her husband had backed a trailer up to my shed in broad daylight and driven off with my tractor. And my neighbor had watched it happen, because in this neighborhood, Greg Caldwell pulling up to someone's property with a work trailer was just another Tuesday. Nobody questioned it. Nobody called, because Denise ran this street and Greg was her hands. I looked at the empty shed, the oil stain on the concrete, the tire ruts in the mud. 4 days. That's how long it took Denise Caldwell to go from losing an argument to stealing $52,000. The next morning I remembered the trail camera. I'd mounted a cheap cell-enabled cam on a tree facing the driveway about 8 months earlier. Originally for wildlife, we'd had coyotes coming through the back tree line, but it covered the equipment shed, the driveway, and about 30 feet of the gravel road. I pulled up the app on my phone and scrolled to Thursday afternoon. There it was. Greg Caldwell, clear as day, driving my tractor up a set of aluminum ramps onto the back of his company flatbed trailer. No mask, no hurry, no attempt to hide. Just a man loading someone else's $52,000 machine onto his truck in broad daylight, like he was picking up a rental. The timestamp matched Walt's account, 2:47 p.m. I was 60 miles away on shift. I watched the footage 3 times. Each time it hit the same way. That was my shed, my driveway, my tractor. And that was Greg Caldwell, a man I'd waved to from the road, whose wife had sat across a table from me 4 days earlier and pretended this was about community standards, loading my property onto his trailer like he was clearing inventory from a job site. He even stopped halfway to wipe his forehead and take a drink from a water bottle. No rush, no nerves. A man doing a chore his wife had assigned him. I saved the footage, backed it up to my laptop and a USB drive. Then I drove to the sheriff's office with the video on my phone, Walt's contact information, and my case number from the theft report. The deputy at the counter was a different guy from the one who'd taken the phone report. Older, patient. He watched the footage on my phone, tilting the screen to cut the glare from the overhead lights. "That's pretty clear," he said. He wrote down Greg's name, the timestamp, the vehicle description. "We'll follow up with Mr. Caldwell." "How long?" "Give us a couple days. We'll reach out to him and get his side." His side. Like there were 2 sides to a man caught on camera driving off with $52,000 of someone else's property. I left the station feeling something close to relief. Anyway, clear video identified suspect. Eyewitness corroboration. This wasn't complicated. The system would work. It had to. 2 days later, the deputy called. "Mr. Morrison, we spoke with Greg Caldwell about the equipment. He says the HOA authorized the removal. His wife provided us with a signed board resolution." I sat down on the edge of my kitchen counter. "A what? A board resolution? Hang on." Papers shuffling. "Resolution 2024-09. Authorization for removal of non-compliant equipment per Section 4.3, signed by the board president. Section 4.3.3, the same section that didn't apply to my lot. The same argument I'd already won at the board meeting, with documentation in hand. Deputy I was at that board meeting 4 days before the tractor was taken. No resolution was voted on. I watched it happen. There was no vote. Silence on the line. Then, Mr. Morrison, I understand your frustration, but Mrs. Caldwell provided official HOA documentation authorizing the removal. At this point, this looks like a civil dispute between you and your homeowners association. We can't get in the middle of an HOA matter. Deputy, you watched the video. A man drove onto my property with a flatbed trailer and took a $52,000 tractor out of my shed. That's not a policy disagreement, that's theft. I understand how you see it, Mr. Morrison, but the HOA has provided documentation showing the removal was authorized under their governing bylaws. That makes this a civil matter, a contract dispute between you and the association. If you believe the authorization was improper, you can challenge it through the courts. And my tractor, where is it right now, Mr. Caldwell, said it's been stored at a secure location pending resolution of the HOA matter. A secure location? He meant Greg's equipment yard. My tractor was sitting behind a chain-link fence at the business of the man who stole it, and the sheriff's office was calling it stored. He said it the way people say things when the conversation is over. Polite final practiced the voice of a system that had decided what this was before I walked in. I sat in my truck in the sheriff's parking lot for 15 minutes after hanging up. Engine off, windows down, staring at the dashboard. The system had just told me that a man drove onto my property, loaded my tractor onto his trailer, and hauled it away on video. And because his wife handed the sheriff a piece of paper with the word resolution on it, it was a civil matter, $52,000 on camera, and I was supposed to hire a lawyer and wait 6 months. I pulled up the trail cam footage again on my phone and looked at the timestamp. Thursday, 2:47 p.m. The board meeting, where no resolution was voted on, happened the previous Tuesday. That resolution Denise handed to the sheriff. It didn't exist on Tuesday night. I was in the room. I heard every word. No motion, no vote, no discussion of removal authority. Roger Whitfield would confirm it, which meant Denise Caldwell had typed it up sometime between Tuesday night and Thursday afternoon, backdated it, signed it herself, and handed it to the sheriff's office as if it were a legitimate governing document. She hadn't just stolen my tractor. She'd fabricated the paperwork to make it look legal. I started my truck. If the sheriff's office was going to treat this as a civil matter, then I was going to treat it like what it actually was. Not as an angry homeowner, not as a guy who got robbed, but as someone who knew exactly how a criminal investigation works, how evidence chains are built, and what a district attorney needs to see before they'll move. I just wasn't going to tell anyone in this neighborhood how I knew that. Not yet. The first thing I did was request copies of every HOA board meeting minutes from the last 12 months. State statute gives any homeowner that right. I sent the request through the official HOA email address, written, time-stamped, documented. Denise responded the next day. Not with the minutes, with the process. Minutes are available for review at the management office by appointment only. Please contact the board secretary to schedule. No refusal, just a wall of procedure designed to slow me down. Before I could schedule the appointment, another letter arrived. This one was different. Heavier paper, legal formatting, county recorder stamp in the corner. The HOA had filed a lien against my property. $6, $400. I read the breakdown twice. $200 a day for 32 days, the entire period, from the first violation through the date the tractor was removed. Denise was fining me for having the tractor on my property and charging me for the period before her husband took it. She'd created the violation, manufactured the removal, and then billed me for the gap between them. I stood at my kitchen counter, reading that lien notice for a long time. $6, $400 for a tractor that had been stolen from me. Every day the fines ticked up, the number got bigger, and the tractor sat in Greg Caldwell's yard. The math was insane. Denise was charging me rent on my own property for equipment her husband had hauled away. I called a real estate attorney the next morning. Sat in his office for 30 minutes while he reviewed the filing. He was third polite and completely unhelpful. The lien is technically filed correctly, he said, adjusting his glasses. The underlying violations may be baseless, and you'd have a strong case to contest them. But the process for challenging an HOA lien is civil litigation. That's a 6 to 12-month timeline. And in the meantime, the lien clouds your title. What does that mean practically? You can't sell, can't refinance, can't take a home equity line. The lien sits on your property record until it's resolved by payment or court order. I thanked him and drove home. Denise Caldwell had put a lock on my land, on the land I'd saved 10 years to buy, the land I owned free and clear without ever setting foot on it. A piece of paper filed at the county recorder's office, backed by violations that didn't apply and a resolution that didn't exist. A week later, a special board meeting notice appeared in my mailbox. 48 hours notice, single agenda item, ongoing non-compliance by Lot 14. My lot. I showed up. The meeting room had the same folding chairs, the same bad coffee smell. Denise sat at the head of the table with a manila folder and a yellow legal pad. Her ally on the board, the woman who never looked up, sat to her right, with a copy of what looked like the same folder. Roger Whitfield was in his usual seat, arms crossed, staring at the table. Denise opened the folder and began reading her version. Clean, rehearsed, delivered like a court clerk reading charges. Mr. Morrison was issued multiple violation notices for non-compliant equipment on his property. He failed to remedy the violations within the prescribed time frame. The board authorized removal of the equipment pursuant to its governing authority. Fines have accrued per schedule. The homeowner has been notified of the lien and the compliance deadline. She closed the folder, looked at me. Do you have anything to add before the board votes on next steps? I do, I said. Show me the signed resolution, the one that authorized removing my tractor. I want to see every board member's signature and the date it was passed. Denise didn't blink. The documentation is on file. This meeting is about your outstanding fines. I'm asking a simple question. Did this board vote on a resolution authorizing the removal of my equipment, yes or no? Roger Whitfield shifted in his seat. Then he spoke, and his voice was quiet but clear. I don't remember voting on any removal resolution. The room stopped. Denise turned toward Roger. Same slow head turn from the last meeting. Same silence, but this time Roger didn't lean back. He just sat there, arms still crossed, looking at her. Denise recovered faster than I expected. Her voice didn't waver. It was an executive action within the president's authority under the board's general governance powers. The president has discretion to act in urgent matters without a full board vote. I let that sit in the room for a second. Let the other board members hear it. The CCNRs don't grant the president unilateral authority to authorize property removal. I said, I've read the governing documents cover to cover. Can you show me the section that does? Denise looked at me. Then she looked at her folder. Then she looked back at me. This meeting is about compliance, Mr. Morrison, not about relitigating board procedures. It's about a resolution that nobody voted on, I said. That's not a procedure question. That's a legitimacy question. The room went quiet again. The board secretary stared at her phone. The other man studied the ceiling. Roger sat still. The meeting ended 10 minutes later. Denise moved to uphold the lien and continue daily fines. Her allies seconded it without a word, didn't even look up. Roger voted no. Outvoted 3-1, with Denise casting her own vote as chair. I walked to my truck in the parking lot and sat for a moment before starting the engine. The lien was real. The fines were climbing. Denise still had the board, the paperwork, and my tractor, but she'd also just given me two things she didn't intend to. Roger Whitfield had said on the record that he never voted on the resolution, and Denise herself had admitted in front of witnesses that she'd acted unilaterally under executive authority, an authority the CCNRs don't give her. She didn't know it yet, but every time she opened her mouth at these meetings, she was building my case for me. The fines were at $6,400 and counting. My tractor was still gone, and Denise Caldwell was just getting started. So was I. I stopped going to meetings, stopped responding to letters, stopped giving Denise Caldwell anything to react to. Instead, I went to work. Not my day job, the other kind. On my off days, I built the case. Quiet, methodical, no confrontations, no angry phone calls, just evidence. First, Roger Whitfield. I met him at a diner 2 towns over on a Wednesday morning. He looked tired. Said he joined the board 3 years ago thinking it was about landscaping contracts and fence heights. I didn't sign up for this, he said. She runs it like it's her personal kingdom. The rest of us just sit there. I asked if he'd sign a sworn statement confirming that he never voted on Resolution 2024-09 and was never present for any executive session authorizing equipment removal. Roger put his coffee down, looked at me for a long time. Yeah, he said. I'll sign it because it's the truth. That resolution didn't exist until after your tractor was already gone. He signed it that morning, notarized at the UPS store on the way home. Next, the minutes. The formal records request I'd filed, the one Denise had stalled with her appointment-only routine, finally came through. State statute requires HOAs to produce meeting records within 10 business days of a written request. She'd pushed it to day 9, but she couldn't refuse. I sat at my kitchen table and went through every page. The minutes from the Tuesday meeting, the one I had attended, showed exactly what I remembered. Homeowner concerns. My presentation about the 3-acre exemption discussion, no vote, no resolution. Then I checked the minutes Denise had dated the resolution against. The date she'd stamped on Resolution 2024-09 fell 2 days before the meeting I attended. But the minutes from that date showed only 2 agenda items, a landscaping contract renewal and a fence height amendment. Nothing about equipment removal, nothing about Lot 14, nothing about Section 4.3. The resolution was a ghost. It appeared in no meeting record on no agenda and no vote tally. It existed only as a standalone document that Denise had produced for the sheriff's office after the theft had already occurred. I pulled Greg Caldwell's business records next. Public Filings State Contractor Database. His landscaping company, Caldwell Grading and Land Services, had its contractor license suspended 6 months earlier for an insurance lapse never reinstated. Which meant, on the day Greg loaded my $52,000 tractor onto his flatbed trailer, he was operating commercial equipment on someone else's property without a valid license or insurance. That was a violation on its own, but it wasn't the piece I needed most. The piece I needed most came from a colleague. I won't go into the procedural details. What I'll say is that everything was obtained through proper legal channels with appropriate authorization on the record. I didn't cut corners. I didn't have to. The text messages between Denise and Greg from the night before the theft. Denise, 9:14 p.m. Do it tomorrow while he's on shift. Back the trailer up to the shed. I'll handle the paperwork after. Greg, 9:16 p.m. You sure, Denise? 9:17 p.m. Just do it. Nobody's going to fight us over a tractor. I read those messages 3 times. I'll handle the paperwork after, not before. After. She told her husband to take my property first and created the justification later, premeditated, coordinated, on the record. I printed the messages, added them to the folder. By that point, the folder held trail camera footage with timestamp, Walt Jennings' eyewitness account, the fabricated resolution 2024-09, Roger Whitfield's sworn statement, 12 months of board meeting minutes showing no vote ever occurred, Greg's suspended contractor license, and the text messages proving Denise ordered the theft and planned to create the paperwork after the fact. I contacted the district attorney's office, not through the front desk, through professional channels, the kind that get your call returned the same day. I laid out the case. The DA's office reviewed the evidence package. Their assessment: grand theft Class C felony at $52,000, conspiracy to commit grand theft, fabrication of a governing document to obstruct a criminal investigation, not a civil matter, not an HOA dispute, felony charges. The DA's office prepared arrest warrants. I made one request: to be present when Greg was served. Not to gloat, because Greg had been coming to my property every weekend for 3 weeks to check if I'd come to my senses. He'd show up Saturday morning, lean against his truck, and remind me about the fines and the foreclosure clock. I wanted to be on my porch when he came for the last time. While the warrants were being processed, Denise made her final move, a certified letter. Green card receipt. Return signature required. I opened it at the mailbox. The HOA, meaning Denise, was demanding payment of $10,200, the original $6,400 in lien fines, plus $3,800 in additional accumulated daily penalties. Payment due within 14 days. If not received, the letter stated the HOA would initiate foreclosure proceedings on my property. Foreclosure on a house I owned free and clear over a tractor that the HOA president's husband had stolen from my shed. $10,200. 14 days for manufactured fines on fabricated violations backed by a forged resolution. I folded the letter, slid it back in the envelope, and set it on my kitchen counter. Saturday was 6 days away. Greg would come same as always. This time I'd be ready. Saturday morning. Clear sky, cool air, no wind. I was on my porch at 7:30 with a cup of coffee, and the folded foreclosure letter on the railing beside me, badge wallet in my back pocket. Same pocket, same spot every day for 12 years. Only difference was today someone was going to see it. Down the road, about a quarter mile past the tree line, a dark sedan sat on the shoulder. DA's investigator. We'd coordinated the timing the night before. He'd wait for my signal, a phone call, or move in on his own if things went sideways. I sipped my coffee and waited. At 9:22 a.m., Greg Caldwell's white truck turned onto my gravel drive, right on schedule, every Saturday for 3 weeks. Same time, same truck, same routine. He'd pull up lean against the tailgate and deliver whatever message Denise had loaded him with. That morning, he parked in front of the shed, got out, left the engine running. He never planned to stay long, walked toward the porch with that rolling walk of his, thumbs hooked in his belt loops, chin up, a man who owned every room he walked into because his wife told him he could. Morning, he said. Didn't wait for a response. 12 days left on that notice. Denise wanted me to tell you she's already got the foreclosure paperwork drawn up. You can write a check today and make this go away, or you can keep playing tough and lose the whole property. He stopped at the bottom of the porch steps, looked up at me. Your choice, Kyle, but I'll be honest. Nobody on this street is going to feel sorry for you. I took a slow sip of coffee, set the mug on the railing next to the foreclosure letter. Greg, I said, where's my tractor right now? He tilted his head, surprised I was asking a question instead of arguing. It's at my equipment yard, same place it's been. You want it back, pay the fines. So you're confirming you have it? You took it from my shed, loaded it onto your trailer, and drove it to your yard. He spread his arms wide like I just asked if the sky was blue. Yeah, the HOA authorized the removal. I handled it. That's what happened. It's documented. And it's still there at your yard right now. Where else would it be? He laughed a short, barking laugh that sounded like a dog that thinks it's bigger than it is. What are you going to do about it, Kyle? Call the sheriff again. They already told you it's a civil matter. Your move. He crossed his arms, planted his feet, rocked back on his heels, with a grin that said he'd already won this conversation before he got out of his truck. Tell you what he said. I'll make it easy. I'll even knock 1,000 off if you pay today. Call it a neighborly discount. He winked. Actually winked. Denise doesn't need to know. I looked at him. The man who'd stolen from me was standing on my property, offering me a discount on fines for the theft and calling it a favor. I set my coffee down. I reached into my back pocket. Slow, same motion I'd made 1,000 times, pulling out a regular wallet. My fingers found the leather case smooth and worn, and I drew it out and held it at my side for a moment. Greg glanced at my hand, then back at my face. He wasn't worried yet. He thought I was pulling out a checkbook. I flipped the wallet open and held it up at chest height, badge facing out. State Police Criminal Investigator Gold Shield Photo ID, my name and rank printed under the seal. I'm going to do my job, Greg. I've seen a lot of reactions in 12 years. Seen people freeze, seen people run, seen people start talking so fast their words blur together. Greg did all three at once. The smirk didn't just disappear, it collapsed like a mask coming off. His face went white, starting at the forehead and draining down. His mouth opened and closed twice. No sound. Then his legs decided to move before his brain did. He stepped backward, and his boot heel caught the edge of the porch step. His hand shot out and grabbed the railing. He hung there for a second, half sitting, half standing, staring at the badge like it was going to bite him. "Wait," he said. His voice cracked on the word. You're a what?" I didn't raise my voice. Didn't need to. "I'm a criminal investigator with the state police. You stole $52,000 worth of my property from my equipment shed. That's a Class C felony. Your wife fabricated a board resolution to cover it and provided it to the sheriff's office to obstruct the investigation. I have trail camera footage of you loading my tractor onto your trailer. I have the texts your wife sent you the night before telling you to do it while I was on shift. I have a sworn statement from a board member confirming he never voted on the resolution, and I have 12 months of meeting minutes proving no vote ever took place." I let each sentence land, gave him time to hear it, gave the air between us time to carry the weight. Greg sat down on the porch steps, not because I told him to, because his legs stopped working. He put his head in his hands. "That was Denise. Told me it was legal," he said faster now. "She said the board voted. She said the resolution was on file. I did what she told me to do. The board never voted. Greg, I was at that meeting. There was no motion, no discussion, and no vote. Your wife typed that resolution after you'd already taken the tractor. She told you herself, 'I'll handle the paperwork after.' Those are her words. I have them." He looked up at me. The man who'd been standing on my porch 5 minutes ago, threatening to take my house, was sitting on my steps, looking like he'd forgotten how to breathe. What happens now? I pulled out my phone and made the call. The dark sedan at the end of the road started moving. Greg heard the gravel, turned his head, watched the car come up the drive. A man in a gray suit got out, badge on his belt folder in his hand. The DA's investigator walked up the porch steps, introduced himself, and laid it out for Greg in plain language. Grand theft Class C felony warrant issued. Greg stared at the ground. His hands were shaking. He didn't ask to call Denise, didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't say a word about his rights. He just nodded small mechanical nods, like a man agreeing to something he doesn't understand yet, but knows he can't stop. He stood up slowly, both hands gripping the railing, like it was the only solid thing left in his world. The investigator guided him toward the sedan. Greg walked with his arms at his sides and his head down, shuffling across the same gravel where he'd parked his truck every Saturday, with his chin up and his chest out. They passed the equipment shed on the way to the car, the empty shed, the open door, the oil stain on the concrete. Greg looked at the space where my tractor had been, the space he'd cleared out 3 weeks ago, and said one thing: quiet. Not to me, not to the investigator, almost to himself. Denise said nobody would care about a tractor. I watched the sedan pull down the gravel drive, turn onto the road, and disappear past the tree line. Then I picked up my coffee. It was cold. They arrested Denise 4 hours later. Deputies knocked on her front door just after 1 in the afternoon. She answered in a bathrobe, not dressed, not composed, not ready. The woman who'd spent 3 years telling the neighborhood what their yards should look like, what their fences should measure, what their equipment sheds should contain. She answered the door looking like she'd just rolled out of bed on a Saturday. Conspiracy to commit grand theft fabrication of a governing document obstruction. She didn't go quietly. I heard later that she told the deputies the resolution was legitimate, that the board had authorized everything, and that this was a misunderstanding that her attorney would clear up by Monday. She was still talking when they put her in the car. Monday came. Her attorney did not clear it up. The following week, a county sheriff's deputy showed up at Greg's equipment yard. What was left of it anyway, with a recovery order. My tractor was in the back corner, parked between a busted skid steer and a pile of culvert pipe. Muddy scratch on the hood from the loading ramp, but mechanically fine. Greg had never even used it. He'd just hidden it. I drove it home on my own trailer, backed it into the equipment shed. Same oil stain on the concrete, same spot, same machine. This time I installed a padlock on the shed door. Brushed steel, 5-pin tumbler, $12 at the hardware store. I stood in the doorway for a moment and looked at the tractor sitting where it belonged. $52,000, 3 weeks a lien, a forged resolution, a sheriff who wouldn't listen, and a man on my porch every Saturday morning telling me to give up. $12 padlock. Should have done it from the start. With Denise removed from the board and facing criminal charges, Roger Whitfield stepped in as interim president. His first official action was a motion to rescind every violation against Lot 14 and void the lien in its entirety. $10, $200 in manufactured fines erased. The motion passed unanimously. Nobody on the remaining board argued. Nobody tried to defend Denise's executive authority. Roger called me after the vote. I should have spoken up louder the first time. He said, "You spoke up when it mattered." I told him, Resolution 2024-09, the ghost document that never appeared in any meeting minutes, never received a board vote, and was created after the crime it was supposed to authorize, was formally expunged from HOA records. Greg's case resolved first. His attorney negotiated a plea, a reduced felony charge, 3 years probation, full restitution for the tractor damage, and 200 hours of community service. His landscaping company, Caldwell Grading and Land Services, folded within 2 months. Turns out it's hard to win contracts when your name shows up in the county court records for stealing a client's equipment. Denise's case took longer. She went to trial. She refused to plead maintained until the end that she had executive authority as board president to authorize the removal. Her attorney argued it was a good faith interpretation of HOA governance powers. The jury saw the text messages. "Do it tomorrow while he's on shift. I'll handle the paperwork after." They deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty. Conspiracy to commit grand theft. I wasn't in the courtroom. Didn't need to be. By then, the case had its own momentum. What I'd built was the engine. The system ran it from there. A few weeks after the trial, I did one last thing. I took the foreclosure threat letter, the one Denise had sent demanding $10,200 in 14 days, and had it framed. Simple black frame glass front. I hung it on the wall inside the equipment shed, right next to the spot where I hang the tractor keys. Not out of spite, I don't spend my evenings staring at it, but every time I reach for the keys, it's there in the corner of my eye. A reminder of what somebody tried to do with a title they gave themselves and a piece of paper they made up. The tractor sits in the shed now, same as before. On warm days, I leave the door open while I'm working the property, mowing the back acre, grading the drive after a rain, clearing brush from the tree line. Same work, same machine, same 4.2 acres. The difference is I know now. I know what people will do when they think authority means ownership. When they think a title on a board gives them the right to take what isn't theirs. When they look at someone quiet and assume he's weak. Saturday mornings, I sit on my porch with a cup of coffee. Same porch, same railing. Same view of the gravel drive and the shed door and the acreage stretching out to the tree line. No white truck pulling in, no finger in my face, no threats about foreclosure or fines or what Denise wants this week. Just the land, the tractor, the quiet. Greg said something as they walked him to the car that day, said it like it was Denise's fault for getting the math wrong, like the only mistake was the bet, not the crime. Denise said nobody would care about a tractor. Nobody did except me.